The creek rose fast, swallowing the valley's breath. Tommy slipped. No scream, just a small splash, like a prayer cut short. Rose didn't think. She dove. The water bit into her skin. Rocks slammed her ribs. Every hit tried to break her, but a mother doesn't bargain with God when her child is drowning. She moves, she claws, she fights. Luke dragged Tommy out. Rose didn't surface. And when Gideon Hale carried her from that river, blue-lipped, shaking, that's when the real night began. Drunken riders, stones smashing the windows, voices calling out, "Come on out, Hale, if you're man enough." He almost pulled the trigger, almost walked straight into Silas Crow's trap. Until Rose, ribs cracked, barely standing, whispered the only line that could stop a bullet. "Don't shoot. The children are watching." Before we begin, hit subscribe and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. Snow drove sideways across the Montana plain, cutting the world down to a white blade and a breath. Ellie McKenna leaned her shoulder into the wind, pulling the rope harder, dragging the crude little sled that carried her brother. Tommy didn't stir. The bell tied to his wrist, her only proof he was still in this world, had gone quiet nearly a mile back. "Just a little more," Ellie whispered, though her lips barely moved. They were too cold to shape anything but prayer. "Lord, don't take him. Not tonight. Please, not on Christmas week." Rose stumbled behind them, one hand clutching the boy's thin blanket, the other closing around nothing, as if she could hold her strength in place by sheer will. Snow clung to her lashes like frost-bitten dust. She'd long stopped wiping it away. When the fence posts finally rose out of the white, dark, tall, solid, Ellie nearly sobbed. A ranch meant fire. A ranch meant walls. A ranch meant maybe, just maybe, God hadn't gone silent after all. But the gate didn't open for them. It just stood there, locked by wind and iron. Ellie pounded her fist against the wood. "Please, somebody! He's cold!" No answer, only the howl of the storm. Tommy's chest barely lifted. Rose's breath hitched. She dropped to her knees, snow puffing around her skirts. "Mr. Hale, anyone?" Rose's voice cracked apart. She bowed her head the way she had at her husband's grave, hands shaking, words breaking loose on their own. "Take me if you must. Just save my children." For a moment, nothing moved. The storm felt like judgment. Then a door slammed open somewhere beyond the corral. Bootsteps thudded across the porch, slow but certain. A lantern flared, warm, gold, too bright against all that white. The man holding it didn't ask who they were. He looked first at the children. "Ma'am," he said, voice flat, steady. "Lift his arm." Rose did. The bell didn't ring. Gideon Hale crouched beside the sled. He pressed two fingers to hone Tommy's throat, jaw tightening at the shallow flutter he found. His other hand brushed snow from Ellie's hair. Not gentle, not unkind, just checking for life. "He's slipping," Gideon said. "Both of them will be gone if we stand here talking." A woman's voice snapped from behind him. "Gideon, you don't know who they are." Marta Hale, gray hair, stiff shawl, eyes sharp as whetted steel. Rose lifted her chin. "Just a night's fire. Food. We'll work for it. I swear it before God." Gideon didn't look at Marta. Didn't look at Rose either. He just said, Pick him up. Rose froze. Sir, we don't need... You need a stove, he cut in. And a roof. Lift him. Ellie darted in before her mother could argue. She tried to lift her brother herself, but Tommy's limbs hung heavy, dead weight heavy. Gideon reached down, scooped the boy into his arms like he weighed nothing but worry. Rose's breath caught. Please, don't let him fall asleep. I won't, Gideon said. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. Inside the house, heat slammed into them. The smell of wood smoke, coffee, and saddle soap spread through the air like a miracle. Gideon kicked the door shut, carried Tommy straight to the hearth, and barked orders with the precision of a man used to people listening. Marta, blankets. Luke, ride for Dr. Whitcomb. Girl, sit here, hands near the fire, not too close. Ellie obeyed before she even realized he was talking to her. Rose hovered at the doorway, unsure if she was allowed inside. The room spun. She clutched the frame. Ma'am. Gideon didn't look back. If you faint, your children lose more time. Get in here. She stepped in. The firelight hit her face, turning the frost on her cheekbones into liquid. She tried to steady herself. Marta thrust blankets toward her with a huff. Wrap them. Don't argue. Rose wrapped Ellie first, then Tommy. Her fingers fumbled, stiff, nearly numb. She tucked the bell under the blanket, whispering again without meaning to. Lord, don't take him. Don't take either of them. Gideon stood close enough to hear. His jaw flexed once, as if a memory passed through him, fast, sharp, unwelcome. He turned away before it stayed too long. Dr. Whitcomb will be here soon, he said. You three stay till morning. Then we talk. Rose shifted. Sir, we don't want trouble. You already have trouble, Gideon said. I'm trying not to let it kill your boy. Ellie stared up at him with wide, cracked eyes. Mr. Hale, will he wake up? Gideon crouched again, one hand resting lightly on Tommy's small shoulder. He didn't answer right away. Only watched the boy's chest for a long, slow rise. Finally, softly, but with the weight of a vow, he said, Not on my watch, sweetheart. Not tonight. Ellie's cracked lips trembled. She nodded, just once. Outside, the storm roared against the windows, clawing to get in. Inside, firelight held the darkness back. Thin, fragile, stubborn. Christmas week in Montana. A night when even God seemed cold. And yet here they were. 3 strangers, 1 rancher, and a bell that hadn't rung in far too long. The fire snapped hard, throwing sparks up the brick like Christmas stars fighting to stay lit. Ellie held her hands out, palms trembling over the heat. She didn't complain. She hadn't complained since they left the rail spur 2 days ago. Children who survived this land learned silence faster than speech. Tommy lay wrapped in 2 blankets near the hearth. His breath rattled once, thin as a prayer slipping through a broken church window. Rose knelt beside him, rubbing his arms, whispering his name in rhythm, as if keeping him tethered by sound alone. Gideon Hale stood over them with the stillness of a man built for storms, not for company. Snow melted off his coat, running in thin, cold rivers down the leather. His eyes didn't leave the boy. His lungs are fighting, Gideon said. We need the doctor. Luke didn't waste time. The door slammed behind him, wind kicking in like a drunk trying to force his way inside. Marta shoved it shut with her shoulder and muttered something sharp about, bringing half the blizzard into her clean floors. Gideon didn't look her way. "Boil water," Marta grumbled, but her hands were already moving, hooking the kettle, throwing another log on, snatching a jar of salve from a shelf so old its hinges sagged. Rose shifted, unsure. "Sir, we're strangers. We shouldn't—" "You should sit," Gideon said. "That's what you should." It wasn't anger. It wasn't kindness. It was command, shaped by habit and bone, the way a ranch boss talked when he had no time for discussion. Rose swallowed. "Mr. Hale, this isn't your burden." He finally tore his eyes from the boy. The look he gave her wasn't soft, wasn't hard either. Just honest in a way that didn't care if it hurt. "Ma'am, burdens come in two kinds out here. The kind you choose and the kind you let kill someone." He nodded at Tommy. "I'm choosing." Rose's breath trembled. Ellie watched the exchange with the sharp instinct of a child who'd had to read adults the way others read scripture. "Mr. Hale?" Ellie's voice was small. "Is he gonna leave?" Gideon crouched again, brushing back Tommy's damp hair. "Not tonight." A vow in plain workman's English, the kind that held more weight than any sermon. Outside, hooves pounded back across the snow. Luke burst in, stamping ice off his boots. "Doc's on his way," he said. "Says the road's near gone, but he's coming." Gideon nodded once. "Good. Get the lamp in the front window. Guide him in." Luke rushed out again. Rose tried rising to help, but her legs almost folded. Marta caught her elbow before she hit the floor. "For heaven's sake, sit before you crack your skull," Marta barked. Rose startled at the roughness. Marta huffed. "Sit!" Rose sat. Ellie leaned closer to the fire, watching her brother's chest with every ounce of strength she had left. The bell under his blanket didn't move. Gideon noticed. He reached over, loosened the cloth so he could see the boy's tiny wrist. He touched the pulse again. A faint beat. Sluggish. Stubborn. "Still here," he murmured. Rose closed her eyes for half a second. The closest she'd come to relief since the storm swallowed the trail. Marta returned with 2 tin cups and set one beside Ellie. "Drink," she ordered. "Slow. Sip. Don't argue." Ellie obeyed instantly. Rose whispered, "Thank you." Marta sniffed. "Don't thank me yet. I don't like this arrangement." Gideon straightened at that. "It's not an arrangement. It's a night." "A night becomes talk," Marta shot back. "It becomes nothing unless we let it," Gideon said, tone dropping to steel. "They're staying till morning. Then we see." Rose lowered her head. She knew enough about ranch politics to understand what "see" meant. Decisions, rules, maybe goodbye. The wind battered the walls again, the sound like fists slamming heaven's door. Then hoofbeats, slower, closer, familiar. Luke flung the door wide. Dr. Whitcomb stumbled in with his bag under one arm and snow clinging to his beard. "Where's the boy?" he asked. Gideon pointed. The doctor knelt beside Tommy and went to work, checking pupils, chest, fingers, the small bluish tint around the lips. He pressed an ear to the boy's ribs. "Cold's in deep," the doctor said, "but not past the point of no return." Rose covered her mouth. "Keep the heat steady," Dr. Whitcomb instructed, "and keep him awake if he stirs." "He hasn't stirred," Ellie whispered. The doctor looked at her. Really looked. You dragged him here? Ellie nodded. Then you saved him. Remember that. Ellie didn't answer, but something in her posture eased, just a fraction. Dr. Whitcomb turned to Gideon. They'll need a place to stay the night, maybe longer. Gideon already knew. Rose tried to speak. Sir, Morning, Gideon said. We settle everything in the morning. His voice left no room to argue. Tommy's chest rose again, barely more than a tremor, but enough to stir the bell under the blanket. A single, soft ring. Marta froze. Ellie gasped. Rose wept without sound. Gideon let out one slow breath, the kind a man only releases when he feels God finally looked his way. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, a faint bell answered. Dawn didn't come kindly. It slid over the snow like a dull knife, gray and slow, barely enough light to tell morning from the leftover dark. Gideon Hale pushed open the kitchen door with a shoulder and stepped inside, boots dripping meltwater onto the boards. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after too many prayers and not enough answers. Tommy slept near the hearth, breath steadier now, though the doctor had warned the fever could tilt either way. Rose sat curled beside him, head bowed but awake, hands cupped around a tin mug she hadn't touched. She looked like a woman bracing for a verdict. Ellie wasn't in sight. Gideon's gaze skimmed the room once, sharp. Where's the girl? Rose startled. She was with me. A shuffle sounded behind the pantry door. Marta lunged first. She yanked the door wide, and there Ellie froze. Small, thin, dirty blonde hair tangled, one hand shoved under her coat, the other clutching the corner of a cloth. Her eyes went wide, caught like a deer under a lantern. What's that? Marta snapped. Ellie didn't answer. Her breathing hitched once. Just once. Marta grabbed her wrist and pulled the stolen thing into view, a half loaf of yesterday's bread, already bitten along one edge. Thief, Marta hissed. I knew it. They come in the night, and the first thing they do is rob us blind. Rose rose too fast and nearly fell. No, ma'am, please, Marta rounded on her. You think I don't see what this is? You stay one night, and suddenly my pantry's charity? Ellie's chin trembled, but she didn't cry. She pressed the bread to her chest like a shield. It's for Tommy, Marta scoffed. Children always have a reason. Ellie swallowed, voice scraping raw. He was shaking again. He said he was hungry. I didn't want him to wake Mr. Hale. That hit the room like a nail driven too deep. Rose stepped forward. Punish me, not them. They've had nothing for days. But Marta only tightened her grip on Ellie's wrist. Nothing? And you think that's my fault? She dragged the girl toward the door. Gideon, she's out. All of them are out. I won't. Enough. Gideon's voice came quiet. Quiet in a way that felt dangerous. Marta froze. He walked over, boots steady, jaw set in the way the ranch hands feared more than storms or droughts. He stood between Ellie and Marta, blocking the girl completely from view. She stole, Marta insisted. We have rules on this ranch. She stole to keep her brother alive. Gideon didn't raise his tone. There's a difference. Marta stiffened. If you let that pass, I decide what passes. He turned then, finally looking at Ellie. Not soft, not pitying, just seeing her, the way a man sees weather before it turns. You give it to him? Gideon asked. Ellie nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. Did you eat any? She shook her head. Just, I needed to see if it was soft enough for him to chew. That small admission did something to Rose. She covered her mouth, shoulders shaking, silent, ashamed. Gideon bent down just enough to meet Ellie's eye level. You come to me next time. She blinked. Sir? If your brother's hungry, if you're hungry, if something's wrong, you come to me, not the pantry. His voice sharpened. Understand? Ellie swallowed. Yes, sir. Marta sputtered. Gideon, you can't reward. I'm not rewarding, he said. I'm correcting. Then to Ellie, hand me the bread. She hesitated only a breath before offering it up like an offering she feared might burn her palms. Gideon tore it clean in half. He handed the smaller half to Rose. Warm it on the stove. Feed him slowly. Rose nodded, but couldn't speak. Gideon turned back to Marta. They stay till morning, he said again. That includes not starving. Marta glared. You'll regret this. Probably, Gideon said. But not today. Ellie backed toward the fire, arms wrapping around herself, guilt hanging on her like a wet coat. Gideon followed her with his eyes. Girl. She stiffened. Yes, sir? You want to help pay back what you took? Ellie nodded fast. Yes. Anything. He pointed to the basket near the table. Eggs. Count them. Don't break any. It's honest work for an honest mistake. Ellie stood straighter. Yes, sir. She moved to the basket, fingers trembling but determined. Rose exhaled shakily, watching Gideon with something edged. Fear, gratitude, a dawning understanding of the kind of man who'd taken them in. Gideon stepped toward the window, looking out over the frozen yard. The wind cut across the drifts in long, thin strokes. Somewhere down that road, word would spread. Someone always talked. Someone always twisted. But for now, a girl was counting eggs, a boy was breathing steadier, and a mother was learning where the line between charity and dignity truly lay. Gideon rested one hand on the window frame and muttered under his breath, not for anyone to hear. Lord, give me sense enough not to regret this. And outside the storm answered with a quieter wind than before, as if granting him the smallest of mercies. Morning came mean. Frost clung to the window panes like it wanted to stay there forever. The Hale Ranch yard lay under a sheet of white so still it looked carved. Inside, the fire hadn't died. Marta kept it fed with stiff, irritated movements, but she kept it fed all the same. Tommy slept under 2 quilts, breath faint but steady. Ellie sat beside him, counting a second basket of eggs, slow, careful, lips moving with each number like she was reciting scripture. Rose stood in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. Dark rings under her eyes, lips cracked, shoulders squared only because mothers learn to stand even when bone wants to fold. Gideon noticed her the moment he stepped in from the yard. Snow dusted his hat brim and shoulders, the kind of cold that bit through hide. He shut the door, stamping the frost from his boots. You should sit, he said. Rose shook her head. I need to see my children. You've seen them, Gideon replied. Now sit. There was no edge in his voice, just that same unbending authority that didn't care if she liked it. Rose obeyed because her legs decided for her. Gideon took off his gloves, tossed them on the table, and poured himself a mug of coffee that steamed like a warning. He drank once, watching Rose over the rim. "What's your plan?" he asked. Rose blinked. "Sir?" "Your plan," Gideon repeated. "For after today." Her throat worked, but no sound came out at first. We move on," she said finally. "Find somewhere warmer, somewhere with work." "And money?" Gideon asked. "We'll earn it." "Doing what?" Rose stared at her hands. "Whatever someone will hire me for." Marta snorted. "No one's hiring a woman with 2 sick children in dead winter." Rose stiffened. "I can sew. I can cook. I can clean." "Half the valley can do that," Marta snapped. Rose didn't shrink. "Then I'll do it better." Gideon set the mug down with a soft thud, the kind that ended debate without raising a voice. "You can stay here," he said. "Work for wages, room and board for you and the children. It's simple." Rose stared at him, confused, not mistrusting, just trying to understand the terms of survival. "Why?" she whispered. Gideon shrugged once. "Because you need it. And because I don't take charity work on this ranch. Everyone pulls weight, even the small ones." Ellie looked up from her eggs, startled. "Me, sir?" "You're already working," Gideon said. "You want more, we'll find you some. Long as your brother's breathing, and you're not breaking things." Ellie nodded quickly, hands returning to the eggs, as if afraid the offer might disappear. Rose swallowed again. "Mr. Hale, people will talk." "They always talk," he said. "But they'll talk worse about you. About us." "Then let them." Gideon leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table. "Talk's cheap. Work isn't." That line hit Rose like scripture. Blunt, true, unforgiving. She laced her fingers together to hide the tremor. "Sir, we don't want pity." Gideon's expression didn't change. "If I pitied you, I'd send you back into the cold with a loaf of bread and a prayer. I'm offering work, Mrs. McKenna, not mercy." Rose exhaled, a breath that sounded more like surrender than relief. "We'll do it, whatever the job is." Before Gideon could answer, Tommy stirred, whimpering. Ellie jumped to him, brushing his hair, checking the bell, making sure it moved. Gideon's eyes flicked to the boy. "He needs medicine and rest. You'll stay in the bunkhouse for now. Warmer there." Rose hesitated. "We've already taken too much. You've taken nothing," Gideon said, sharper this time. "I'm paying you. You're paying me back with work. Don't twist the terms." Rose lowered her head. "Yes, sir." Marta crossed her arms. "This won't sit right with town. Lone man, widow, children, winter. Town doesn't run my ranch," Gideon said. "I do." Marta opened her mouth, but Gideon cut her with a single look. Cold steel, no patience. Ellie glanced at Rose. "Mama, is it safe?" Rose's voice cracked once, then steadied. "Yes, baby. It's safe." Gideon stood. "Luke will show you the bunkhouse, after the doctor checks the boy again." Rose rose too. "We'll work hard, sir. I swear it before God." Gideon buttoned his coat. "Save your oaths for someone who needs convincing." He stepped outside, snow swallowing him in seconds. Rose watched him go, The man who'd drawn a line in the storm and said these children would not die on his watch. Ellie slipped her hand into Rose's. "Mama," she whispered, "are we staying?" Rose looked at Tommy's small chest, lifting, slow but alive. "For now," she whispered back. "For now, we stay." And outside the wind eased, just enough to hear the faint ring of a bell beneath the blankets. The bunkhouse stove roared like it had something to prove. Heat swelled through the narrow room, spilling over the wooden bunks, the single wash basin, the cracked window patched with flour sack cloth. Rose had cleaned every inch of it by sunrise. She couldn't help it. Work meant worth. Worth kept them alive. Ellie sat cross-legged on the floor, polishing a tin cup with the sleeve of her dress. Tommy slept on the bunk nearest the stove. Small fingers curled loosely around the bell Gideon refused to let anyone remove. Luke Danner pushed open the bunkhouse door without knocking. He carried a bucket of feed and the kind of morning face a longtime ranch hand wears when sleep is optional. "You all right in here?" he asked. Rose nodded. "Yes, sir. Thank you." Luke grinned at that. "Don't sir me. I'm nobody." He set the bucket down, scratched his jaw, then noticed the thin brass tag hanging from Rose's laced bodice, half hidden, half shining. "You keep that on you?" he asked quietly. Rose pressed a hand over it. "Always." Luke stepped closer. He didn't touch it, just looked. The tag was old, edges dented, numbers half worn, but the shape, the emblem. His breath hitched. "Where'd you get that?" Rose hesitated. "My husband, Nathan McKenna." Luke shut his eyes for half a second. "I thought he died." "He did." Luke exhaled through clenched teeth, the way a man does when a memory hits too hard. "Ma'am, that tag didn't belong to him." Rose's fingers tightened. "It was in his coat when they brought him home. He said he earned it helping a pack trapped under a wagon last spring, out past Bitter Creek." Luke's jaw set. "That man was me." The words hung there, heavy, irrefutable. Ellie froze mid-polish. "Mama?" Rose didn't speak. Luke looked at her, then lowered his head like a man standing at a graveside. "Your husband saved my life. Pulled me out when my leg snapped under the axle. Snow came in so fast we thought the Lord was calling names." Rose blinked hard. "Nathan didn't tell me who." "He wouldn't." Luke's voice softened. "Good men don't brag." Rose's throat worked. "He said he didn't have much to give us, except his word that someone in this valley would owe him a favor if things went bad." Luke nodded. He wasn't wrong. The bunkhouse door opened again. Gideon Hale stepped inside, boots thudding, coat still dusted white. He looked from Luke to Rose to the brass tag glinting in her palm. "What's going on?" Luke straightened. "Boss, this is Nathan McKenna's widow." Gideon's eyes lowered to the tag. He didn't take it from her, didn't even reach for it. But the moment he recognized it, something old and cold flickered behind his eyes. "He saved your life," Rose whispered. "No," Gideon said. "He saved my man. That makes it my debt." Rose swallowed. "We didn't come here to collect anything. You didn't have to." Gideon walked past her, checking Tommy's blankets with the back of his hand. "Debt's debt. doesn't change because you're proud. Rose stiffened. Sir, I don't want charity. You're not getting any. Gideon adjusted the quilt around Tommy, straightening the corner with a precision that said more than words. You're working for your keep. I'm honoring mine. Ellie watched him with a wary fascination, like she couldn't decide if he was danger or deliverance. Marta's voice called from outside, sharp as a crack of ice. Gideon, Reverend's come riding. Gideon closed his eyes just once, a long blink that smelled of annoyance and inevitability. Of course he has. Rose tensed. Did we do something wrong? People don't need a reason to meddle, Gideon muttered. They just need a story they like better than the truth. He stepped outside. Luke followed. Rose hovered at the doorway, torn between fear and duty. Ellie slipped beside her, gripping her skirt. Reverend Pritchard stood in the yard with his horse still steaming, face drawn into a solemn, self-important shape. Marta hovered beside him, arms crossed, ready to witness sin where none existed. Mr. Hale, the Reverend said, I heard you took in a widow overnight, with children, under your roof. Gideon didn't flinch. Under my rules. It gives the wrong impression. To who? Gideon asked. To the town. Gideon stepped closer, boots crunching in the snow. Town wasn't here last night when a boy was dying on my porch. Reverend Pritchard faltered but steadied himself. Appearances matter. No, Gideon said. Actions do. Ellie tugged Rose's hand. Mama, can he send us away? Before Rose could answer, Gideon turned, eyes landing on the girl with a force that silenced even the wind. No one's sending you anywhere, he said. Then quieter. Not till your brother stands on both feet. Marta bristled. Gideon, enough, he said. And that was that. The Reverend shifted uncomfortably, sensing the line he couldn't cross. Well, I hope you know what you're doing. Gideon's jaw tightened. I do. He didn't look at Rose. Didn't have to. She knew exactly what that meant. Work for work, debt for debt, honor for honor. Nothing free. Nothing owed that wouldn't be answered. And behind them, the bunkhouse stove roared hotter, like it knew the truth had just changed the whole shape of winter. Reverend Pritchard didn't leave right away. Men like him rarely did. They lingered, like judgment, like frost, waiting for someone to confess a sin, whether or not one had been committed. He stood in the yard with his gloves clasped behind his back, surveying the ranch as if the Lord himself had asked for a report. His horse stamped impatiently, breath curling up in ghostly plumes. Rose kept to the doorway of the bunkhouse, unsure whether stepping out would help or harm. Ellie pressed against her side, rigid as a fence post in sleet. Gideon stood between them and the Reverend, a line drawn quiet but unmistakable. I only came to ensure propriety, Reverend Pritchard said, voice warm as a tombstone. A widow and 2 young children, spending the night under a man's roof? Well, tongues wag. Tongues wag anyway, Gideon said. Let them get frostbite doing it. The Reverend smiled in the slow, disappointed way churchmen had perfected through generations. Mr. Hale, appearances matter in a community. Not to a dying child, Gideon said. That landed harder than a fist. Reverend Pritchard studied him, then flicked his gaze toward Rose. Mrs. McKenna, Is this arrangement entirely wholesome? Rose straightened, not out of defiance, but something steadier. My son was cold, sir. Mr. Hale saved him. That is all. All? Marta muttered under her breath. The Reverend heard it anyway. He stepped a little closer. You understand, of course, that the town expects standards. Rose swallowed. The town wasn't there last night. Gideon's jaw twitched with something close to approval. The Reverend's eyes drifted toward Ellie. And you, young lady, you feel comfortable here? Ellie didn't answer. She didn't know if she was allowed to. Gideon cut in. She's not your concern. Everything moral is my concern, the Reverend said. Then go preach in town, Gideon replied. There's enough sin down there to keep you warm through spring. Marta stiffened at that, torn between wanting to scold him and wanting to smile. The Reverend cleared his throat. I will not be spoken to like a stray cowhand. Then mount up, Gideon said, before the storm comes back. For a moment, Rose thought the Reverend might push harder. His pride swelled. His breath puffed in sharper bursts. But finally, he turned toward his horse, gathering the reins with dramatic patience. I trust you will rethink this arrangement, he said, for the sake of your reputation. Gideon didn't blink. My reputation survives winter. Can the town say the same? The Reverend bristled, mounted, and rode off through the slow falling snow. Marta watched him vanish behind a drift, then muttered, Man's got more opinions than cattle. Gideon didn't smile. Opinions spread. Rose stepped out a little further. Sir, will this cause trouble? For you? It always does, Gideon said. Doesn't change anything. But the town, Mrs. McKenna, he said, turning toward her, the town watches everything. It watched when you came in the storm last night. It watched when nobody offered you a roof. It watched your boy freeze. And it said nothing. Rose lowered her eyes. Ellie reached for her hand. Mama, we didn't mean to make trouble. Gideon's gaze softened at the child's worry. You didn't. Then quieter. Trouble came looking. Luke came trotting up from the barn, hair wild from the wind. Boss, folks are already talking at the trading post. Reverend didn't help. I didn't expect him to, Gideon said. They're saying you've taken in a woman, Luke continued. 2 kids, alone, in winter, and that you're... Enough, Gideon cut in. Luke shut his mouth. Rose felt heat rise in her cheeks, but not from shame, from fear, from knowing how fast a lie could grow legs in a small town. I'll go speak to them, she said suddenly. Explain. Tell them you only helped. Tell them it's temporary. Gideon shook his head. You don't owe them an explanation. Maybe I do if they think poorly of you. I don't care what they think, he said. Rose hesitated. But I care. Gideon studied her for a long moment. He wasn't used to people pushing against him without being foolish. She wasn't pushing. She was trying to protect something she didn't quite understand yet. Fine, he said at last. If you're going, Luke goes with you. Rose nodded. But, Gideon added, don't go today. Why not? She whispered. The wind carried a thin, sharp whistle across the yard. Luke stiffened. Marta crossed herself. Gideon's eyes narrowed toward the distant ridge where the trail dipped, home to travelers, drifters, and watchers. Because trouble's riding, he said. I can smell it. Ellie tugged her mother's coat again. Mama? Rose crouched beside her children, wrapping arms around both. Gideon looked at the three of them. One bundle of fear, one shaking breath, one mother holding the world together by thread. He turned to Luke. Double-check the horses and keep your rifle close. Luke nodded once and sprinted off. Because in Montana winters, when the Reverend rides early and the wind changes pitch, it rarely means prayer. It usually means someone else is coming. Night pressed in early, thick and bitter. Clouds smothered the stars until the whole sky felt like a low ceiling ready to crack. The bunkhouse lantern flickered against the boards, barely keeping back the dark. Tommy's fever burned again. Rose knelt by the bunk, dipping a cloth into the basin, wringing it with hands that shook more than the lantern. Ellie hovered close, rubbing her brother's arm the way she'd seen her mother do, copying every motion like a desperate apprentice. Tommy whimpered. Just a breath, just enough to make Ellie freeze. Mama, I know, Rose whispered. I know, baby. He's fighting. The door creaked. Gideon Hale stepped inside, shutting the cold out behind him. His coat was dusted with fresh snow. His jaw was tight enough to crack stone. How long's he been like that? He asked. Since sundown, Rose said. The fever came back strong. Gideon set a small bundle of firewood beside the stove. Dr. Whitcomb's riding from the ridge. Might take him some time. Rose nodded, pressing the cloth to Tommy's forehead. The boy stirred weakly, eyes rolling beneath his lids. Mama, Tommy whispered, voice thin as smoke. Mama, don't close the door. Ellie stiffened. He's dreaming again. Tommy whimpered harder. Papa, don't shut me out. Rose's breath snapped like a thread pulled too tight. She grabbed Tommy's hand and pressed it to her cheek. He's not here, sweetheart, she whispered. Your papa's not here. It's just us. Tommy coughed, a small, fragile sound that tore straight through Gideon's composure. The man's shoulders locked. Something old passed through his face, a shadow that didn't belong to this room or this winter. Gideon turned away abruptly, as if the stove needed tending. It didn't. Rose didn't see the moment the memory struck him, but Ellie did. Children saw what grown-ups hid. Ellie's eyes followed Gideon with a quiet, frightened understanding. Gideon finally spoke. You can't stay here. Ellie gasped. Rose looked up slow, like she wasn't sure she'd heard right. Sir, the town's already talking, Gideon said. Reverend stirred it. Marta's hearing more from the supply riders. If you stay another night, it becomes a problem I can't put back in the bottle. Rose swallowed. Then we'll leave at first light. No. Gideon shook his head once. Tonight. Ellie clutched Rose's sleeve so hard her knuckles whitened. Mr. Hale, we can't go. Tommy can't walk. Gideon didn't look at her. Didn't dare. It's safer if you're gone before dawn. Rose rose to her feet, steadying herself on the bunk. Safer for you, she said quietly. Gideon didn't deny it. He crossed the room as if pacing could make the decision feel less like a noose. I've got a reputation to keep, he said. A ranch that needs peace. A valley that watches everything I do. Then let them watch, Rose said. They didn't care if my son froze. Not the point. Then what is? Gideon opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. I don't break my own rules. Your rule saved my boy, Rose said. Just one night. Gideon's jaw locked. And it ends here. Ellie started crying without sound. Just tears, sliding down her cracked cheeks. Tommy's fevered breathing rattled in the silence. Rose drew Ellie closer. All right, Rose whispered, voice trembling. We'll go. The room felt colder instantly. Gideon turned toward the door, forcing the decision forward with stubborn, ruthless discipline. I'll hitch the wagon. He grabbed his gloves, pushed the door open, and froze. Behind him, Tommy let out a broken sob. Papa, don't close the door, please. Rose covered her mouth. Ellie choked. Mr. Hale, please. Gideon didn't move. He stood in the doorway, wind blowing snow into his coat, back rigid, breath stuck somewhere in his chest. The words in that child's dreams sliced him open in a place he hadn't allowed anyone to touch. A place buried under earth and years and grief. He shut the door, slowly, carefully. Then he turned, eyes fixed on Tommy. No one's going anywhere, he said. Rose blinked. Sir? You're staying, Gideon said, voice low, final. If the valley wants a scandal, they can freeze outside and talk themselves blue. The boy doesn't move. Ellie sobbed once. Relief, shock, gratitude tangled so tight she couldn't breathe. Rose covered her heart, unable to speak. Gideon strode to the bunk, checking Tommy's pulse with a hand that wasn't steady for the first time since she'd met him. The boy's skin burned, his breath rasped. He murmured the same pleading words again, words meant for a father who wasn't alive to hear them. But someone heard. Gideon's voice dropped to a vow carved from stone. I won't close the door on you, he said. Not tonight, not ever while you're under my roof. Tommy settled, breath easing just a fraction. Outside, the wind eased too, as if the whole valley bowed its head to a promise no man should have had to make twice in one lifetime. By midday, the storm had broken, leaving a cold so sharp it felt carved from glass. The ranch yard glittered under the pale sun. Beautiful, if a man didn't know beauty could kill out here. Tommy slept again, breath thready but holding. Ellie sat beside him, stitching a torn glove Marta had thrown her way as something useful to do. Rose scrubbed the wash basin until it shone. Work kept fear from eating her alive. A knock broke the quiet. Not a ranch hand's knock. Slow. Deliberate. Confident. Gideon, standing near the stove, stiffened at the sound. Ellie glanced up, sensing trouble the way feral colts sense lightning. Rose didn't move, but her fingers tightened around the basin's rim. Gideon opened the door. Silas Crow stood on the threshold, dressed in a long black coat trimmed with fine fur, gloves clean enough to belong in a banker's desk, not on a ranch. Snow hadn't dared cling to him. A man who walked through winter untouched was always dangerous. Well now, Silas said, smiling like he'd discovered a joke nobody else understood. Heard rumors drifting through town like chimney smoke. Thought I'd ride up and see the truth myself. Gideon didn't offer him in. Didn't step aside either. State your business. Oh, come on, Gideon. Silas lifted a small parcel wrapped in red cloth. Christmas week. I brought gifts. He angled the parcel just enough for the shape to be obvious. A child's wooden horse, carved smooth. Ellie's breath hitched behind Rose. Gideon's eyes cooled a degree. Why? Hospitality, Silas said lightly. A widow and her two little ones braving the storm. Touching story. Moves a man's heart. Gideon didn't blink. Your heart? Silas chuckled. On rare occasions. Marta appeared behind Gideon, wiping her hands on her apron. Her mouth flattened the moment she saw Silas. We don't need anything from you. Ah, Marta. Silas bowed slightly. Still keeping Hale Ranch pure as driven snow, I see. Marta bristled. Purer than you'll ever be. Gideon shifted just enough to block Marta from stepping forward. You have something to say. Say it. Silas tilted his head, glancing past Gideon as though he could see straight into the bunkhouse shadows. I heard, he said slowly, that you're keeping unusual company these days. A woman, 2 children, under your roof. His eyes glittered. Town's buzzing. You should hear the theories. No interest, Gideon replied. Oh, but you should. Silas smiled wider. A man in your position? Reputation is currency, more valuable than cattle, more fragile than ice. Rose stepped forward before she could stop herself. Mr. Crow, Mr. Hale only helped us. My son was... Silas's eyes slid to her like a knife. Mrs. McKenna, is it? Widowhood's a hard path. Easy to wander into places you shouldn't. Gideon's jaw tightened. Mind your words. Silas raised both, hands as if in peace. Just a friendly reminder. Lone man, lone woman, winter storm. People draw conclusions. He tapped the parcel. This is for the children. No strings, just kindness. Ellie's shoulders bunched. She edged behind Rose. Rose forced herself to speak. We don't want your charity. Silas's smile didn't budge. Charity? No, this is diplomacy. Get off my land, Gideon said. Silas sighed like a disappointed teacher. Always so blunt. You should think about optics, Gideon. Letting a woman stay here. Letting children sleep under your roof. Without paperwork. Without a guardian's oversight. He clicked his tongue. Sheriff might get curious. That a threat? Gideon asked. A forecast. Silas stepped close enough for frost to gather between them. Winter's long, town's bored, and you, my friend, have handed them a story. All I'm doing is participating. He set the parcel on the porch railing. Gideon didn't touch it. Silas turned his horse, reins twinkling with silver pieces that flaunted wealth. I'll be seeing you, he said. Sooner than you'd like. He rode off slowly, deliberately, making sure every hoofprint in the snow stamped his name on the ranch. Gideon watched until the black coat vanished behind the ridge. Only then did he pick up the parcel and toss it straight into the snowbank, burying it with one brutal shove. Marta muttered a satisfied, "Good." Rose stepped out beside Gideon, breath fogging between them. "Sir, what does he want?" Gideon didn't look at her. Everything. Ellie tugged Rose's sleeve. Mama, is he coming back? Men like Silas always come back, Gideon said. They just wait until you're tired. Rose folded her arms around Ellie. What do we do? Rose asked. Gideon fixed his gaze on the trail Silas had taken, voice quiet as a prayer and twice as sharp. We stay alive, he said. That's the first step. and somewhere behind the bunkhouse wall, Tommy coughed. A fragile reminder that winter had claws sharper than any man. Sheriff Kellen never rode hard, unless something was already wrong. So when his horse came blowing steam down the Hale Ranch trail, snow flaring under each pounding hoof, Gideon knew trouble had moved from forecast to arrival. Rose was sweeping the bunkhouse step. Ellie sat on the woodpile, cracking ice lumps apart with a stick. Tommy slept, his fever finally easing into a fragile truce. When the sheriff appeared, Ellie froze mid-swing, like a rabbit catching a hawk's shadow. Kellen dismounted with a grunt. He was a thick-built man, coat worn shiny at the elbows, badge dulled from years of dust and argument. Good lawman, folks said, unless someone with enough money whispered in his ear. "Mr. Hale," he called, voice heavy from the climb. Gideon met him halfway across the yard. "Sheriff?" Kellen adjusted his gloves, the way he always did when the conversation was going to be unpleasant. "Got a complaint filed this morning. Anonymous." "Anonymous means Silas Crow," Gideon said. "Most likely," Kellen admitted. "Still have to check." Rose lowered the broom. Ellie drifted closer, as if proximity to Gideon could anchor them. Kellen's eyes shifted to them. "Mrs. McKenna, is it?" "Yes, sir." "You and your children been staying here?" Rose wet her lips. "Only while my son recovers." Kellen nodded once, but his gaze didn't leave her. "Complaint says there's unlawful detainment, possible exploitation of minors." Ellie grabbed Rose's hand. Rose held strong for her daughter's sake, but her pulse stuttered. Gideon's voice cooled 10 degrees. "Exploitation?" "It's just words," Kellen said, raising a palm. "But words get legs, and Crow's been kicking dust all morning." "Might want to kick him back," Gideon muttered. Kellen sighed. "Let's not make this harder. I need to see where the children sleep, where the woman works, and I need your employment log. Date, pay, terms." Gideon didn't hesitate. "Marta!" The housekeeper stomped out, wiping flour from her arms. "What now?" "Get the ledger." "Which one?" "The wages book." Marta grumbled but went. Kellen glanced around the yard. "Gideon, be straight with me. You keeping them here for the right reasons?" Gideon stared him down. "You questioning my reasons?" "I'm questioning the situation," Kellen said carefully. "A widow, 2 kids, under a single man's roof. Folks in town get ideas." "Folks in town can freeze with their ideas," Gideon replied. "Maybe, but I can't ignore a complaint." Rose stepped forward. "Sheriff, Mr. Hale hasn't touched us, hasn't threatened us. He saved my son's life." Gideon flicked her a look, sharp, warning her not to plead for him. But Rose held steady. Truth wasn't begging. Ellie tugged her coat. "Sir, Mr. Hale gave us food. He let us stay warm, that's all." Kellen softened a little, just a little. "I believe you, but I need proof for the record." Marta returned and shoved the ledger at Gideon. "Here, paper and ink to calm cowards." Gideon opened the book to the newest page. Rose's name, scribbled in carbon pencil, under temporary hire. Laundry, cook's helper, cleaning. A wage amount beside it. Not much, but real. Kellen read it slowly. "You paying her?" "Yes." "And the girl?" Gideon jerked his chin toward Ellie. "Egg counting. No pay, no heavy work." Ellie nodded quickly. "I only count. I don't lift anything." Rose added, "She insisted." Kellen rubbed his beard. It's all clean so far, but folks are saying you kept them against their will. Gideon barked a humorless laugh. Against their will? They walked through a blizzard trying not to die. Still, Kellen said, I need their statement. So take it, Gideon replied. Kellen turned to Rose. Mrs. McKenna, are you here by force? No, sir. Are your children here by force? No, sir. Are you working in exchange for lodging and care? Yes, sir. Do you fear Mr. Hale? She hesitated. Not because she feared him, but because she didn't know if fear was the right word for the kind of man who saved your child while refusing to soften for anyone. No, sir, she said at last. I trust him. Kellen nodded once. The tension in the air eased a fraction. He shut the ledger, slapped it lightly against his thigh. Well, Gideon, paperwork checks out. But consider yourself warned. One wrong move, one rumor with teeth, and the court will drag you in. Gideon's voice didn't waver. Let him try. Kellen mounted his horse. I'll write this up clean. But Crow won't stop. You know that. I know. You ready for that fight? Gideon glanced at the bunkhouse door where Tommy slept, at Ellie gripping Rose's skirt, at Rose standing straighter than she had in days. Ready enough, he said. Kellen rode off, leaving the smell of horses and cold iron in his wake. Rose looked up at Gideon. What do we do now? He closed the ledger, jaw tight. Prove them wrong, every hour, every day. Ellie tugged her mother's sleeve. Mama, can we stay? Gideon didn't look at her, but his voice dropped in a way that silenced the wind. You stay, he said, long as you need. But even as he said it, he knew. Silas Crow wouldn't let this be the end. A to GA had been signed, but paper burned easy in Montana. The snow in town was different from the snow on the ranch. Dirtier, meaner. It clung to the edges of the boardwalk like something thrown out and stepped on too many times. Rose felt it sink through her boots as she walked beside Luke, Ellie trailing close behind. Tommy wrapped against her chest inside Gideon's heavy coat. People stopped talking when they passed. Not openly, just enough for the silence to press against Rose's back like a hand pushing her out of town. Luke murmured, "Keep your head up, ma'am. Don't let 'em smell fear." Rose nodded, though the knot in her throat felt thick as rope. She only needed flour and salve, and to prove, at least to herself, that stepping into town didn't mean surrendering her dignity. Ellie kept her fingers knotted in Rose's skirt. The girl's eyes darted from stranger to stranger. She was used to danger and storms, not danger with faces. They reached Morrow's general store. The bell over the door jingled as Luke pushed it open. Inside, heat and kerosene lamps washed over them. Shelves stacked with canned peaches, nails, fabric bolts. The comfort of a place built for survival, except for the two women standing at the counter, staring at Rose like she'd carried winter on her back. Mrs. Abel, the baker's wife, whispered loud enough to carry. "That's her." The other woman, Mrs. Hart, didn't bother whispering. The widow who moved into Hale Ranch. Shameful. Rose kept walking, straight to the flour sack, but Ellie heard every word. Mrs. Hart clicked her tongue. Living with a man, under his roof, with children. Lord have mercy. Ellie froze. Her face tightened. Her small hand slipped from Rose's skirt. "Don't," Rose whispered sharply. She could feel the shift in her daughter, like a wire pulled too tight. Mrs. Abel added, "I heard he pays her. For what, one wonders." Luke stepped forward. "Enough." Mrs. Hart smirked. "Well, look at that. The ranch sends its own defenders." "Mind your mouth," Luke warned. "Oh, I mind it fine," Mrs. Hart said. "But somebody ought to mind hers." She pointed her chin at Rose. "Before the whole town falls into disgrace." Ellie's breath began to shake. Luke reached for her shoulder, but she slipped aside, fists clenching. "Ellie," Rose said, heart thudding. "Stay with me." Mrs. Abel's voice rose. "Shouldn't bring children into a man's house like that. Not decent." Rose turned. "My son was dying," she said quietly. "Mr. Hale saved him." Mrs. Hart sniffed. "Is that what we're calling it?" That did it. Ellie grabbed the nearest thing, a small rock that had been kicked in from the street, and hurled it at the store window. The glass cracked with a violent, ringing snap. The room went dead silent. Rose's heart slammed in her chest. Ellie stood shaking, cheeks blotched red, chest heaving. Luke cursed under his breath. Mrs. Hart gasped in scandalized triumph. "Well, proof enough of the kind of upbringing." Rose cut her off. Not with words, with movement. She crossed the room, took Ellie's wrist, not harsh, but firm, and led her toward the counter. Ellie resisted once, but Rose's grip held steady. There was no anger in it, no shame, only resolve. Rose faced the storekeeper. "My daughter has something to say." Ellie stared at the floor. "Mama, I don't—" "Look up," Rose said softly. "Tell the truth. We do not let our anger speak for us." Ellie's eyes lifted, wet, furious, terrified all at once. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The storekeeper cleared his throat. "Window'll cost—" "I'll pay," Rose said, "for the damage, and for the flour." Mrs. Hart scoffed. "Apologies won't fix reputation." Rose turned to her. "Reputation doesn't warm a child's body in a storm." Then, without raising her voice, "But truth does." Ellie tugged her sleeve. "Mama, I didn't mean—" "I know," Rose said, "but we own what we break." Luke stepped beside them. "Mrs. Abel, Mrs. Hart." His voice dipped low. "If either of you speak another word about this family, you'll answer to me, and to Mr. Hale." That got their attention. Even gossip had limits when a ranch stood behind its words. Rose guided Ellie out the door, Tommy still warm against her chest. Luke carried the flour under one arm, jaw tight enough to split. Outside, the wind cut hard, but Rose drew Ellie close, shielding her from it. "I was mad," Ellie choked. "I know," Rose said, "but we don't strike back with stones. Stones come back to hurt children." Ellie cried harder. Rose held her. Luke cleared his throat. "Ma'am, Gideon won't like hearing about this." Rose nodded. "I'll tell him myself." They trudged back toward the ranch, snow squeaking under boots, dusk thinning into winter blue. Behind them, the cracked window glinted in the fading light like a wound the whole town would study. And somewhere beyond the ridge, Silas Crow was no doubt smiling, because every crack made room for a knife. The thaw came fast, too fast for Montana. 1 hour of weak sun, and the top layer of snow softened, hiding slick ice beneath it. Meltwater slithered downhill until it fed the creek behind the Hale barn, turning the usual trickle into a restless murmur. Rose heard it first while hanging laundry. The sound was wrong, urgent, swollen. Luke came from the barn, wiping his hands. "Creek's rising," he said. "Kids wander when water moves. Keep 'em close." Rose nodded, though worry was already tugging at her ribs. Inside the bunkhouse, Tommy stirred under his blankets. Ellie sat beside him, watching, guarding. He blinked up, fever-fogged. "I hear water." "It's the creek," Ellie said. "Mama said stay." Tommy slipped off the bunk anyway. "I just want to see the horses." "Tommy, no!" Ellie grabbed him, but he pulled free, urgency outweighing sense. He slipped out the door. Ellie panicked and ran for Rose. Rose dropped the shirt she was hanging the moment she heard, "Mama! Tommy went to the creek!" She didn't breathe. She ran. Snow cracked under her boots. Brush scratched her legs. The thaw's metallic scent filled the air. She spotted Tommy at the sloping bank, tiny hands gripping a fence post for balance. "Tommy!" she shouted. He turned. His foot slid. Rose sprinted. Tommy skidded down the slick slope, bumping toward the churning brown water. He grabbed at roots, snow, anything, but nothing held. The creek roared louder, hungry. Rose dove. She caught the ground hard, knees slamming through ice, palms burning as she clawed downward. Tommy hit a patch of bare ice and shot straight into the creek. The splash was small. Rose didn't hesitate. She plunged after him. The cold seized her like a fist, crushing breath, stealing strength. The current slammed her sideways, dragging her under, dress and coat turning heavy as stone. She fought upward, gasping, eyes searching. Tommy bobbed ahead, whimpering. "Tommy!" she choked. She lunged, fingertips grazing his sleeve. Then the current spun them into a boulder. Pain shot through her shoulder. Tommy slipped another foot away. "No!" she rasped. She kicked, reaching again, hooking her elbow around his chest. She dragged him in, clutching him above the water. He clung to her desperately, breath shuddering. "I got you," she panted. But the creek pushed harder, driving them toward the sharp bend where water dropped half a man's height. If they went over... Rose spotted a jut of rock near the bank. If she could reach it... She kicked, boots slipping on the torrent, lungs screaming. Her fingers numbed, vision flickered. Then a shout ripped through the cold. "Rose!" Luke barreled down the slope, legs sliding. His eyes went wide when he saw them being battered by the current. "Grab him!" Rose screamed. She shifted her weight so Tommy floated closer to the bank. Luke lunged, arm stretching dangerously far. "I got him. Hold on, kid." His hand latched onto Tommy's coat collar. Tommy cried out, but Luke held, muscles straining as he pulled the boy inch by inch from the water's grip. Rose tried to help. Then the creek knocked her under. Water swallowed her whole. Darkness, pressure, rocks. Her lungs seized. She fought upward, but the current spun her, slamming her ribs into stone. Somewhere above, Luke shouted, "I've got Tommy! Rose!" She broke the surface once, coughing, eyes stinging, just in time to see Tommy safe in Luke's arms. Then the current dragged her again, smashing her against a submerged boulder. Light burst behind her eyes. Her hand opened. She went under. Luke shoved Tommy behind a fallen log. "Stay there! Don't move!" he barked, then sprinted along the bank. "Rose! Rose!" He spotted her caught on a half-submerged branch, hair streaming, body limp. Luke dropped flat and reached, fingers scraping. "Come on! Come on!" He hooked her coat, groaned with effort, and dragged her free. Her body collapsed on the snow, drenched, lifeless-looking, breath shallow. "Rose! Rose! Open your eyes!" She didn't. Luke scooped her up and ran. At the top of the rise, Gideon Hale appeared, breath hard, coat flying behind him like he'd outrun the winter itself. One look at Rose, bruised, drenched, blue-lipped, and something ancient cracked inside him. "What happened?" he demanded. "Creek took him. Tommy's safe. She hit her head. She's breathing but faint." Gideon didn't wait. He took her from Luke, lifting her with a gentleness that contradicted the rage building in his jaw. "Get the doctor," he ordered. "Go. Now." Luke ran. Gideon carried Rose across the yard, her hair dripping cold water onto his sleeve. She felt too light, too still. "Come on," he whispered, voice almost prayer. "Stay with me. Stay." Then he stopped, because someone was waiting. Silas Crow leaned against the corral fence, half-smile carved onto his face like a wolf testing whether the herd was weak. "Well now," Silas drawled, "accidents everywhere these days." Gideon didn't answer. The pulse in his jaw hammered. Silas took a slow step. "You really ought to keep an eye on your guests." Gideon shifted Rose closer to his chest. Silas's smile sharpened. "Go on, Mr. Hale. Strike me. Give the sheriff something solid." The temptation cut deep. Gideon didn't move, because Rose was still breathing in his arms, and her children needed her alive more than he needed vengeance. Silas shrugged, amused. "Suit yourself." Gideon walked past him, boots crunching hard, steps promising a storm no man could outrun. Behind him, the last of the thaw slid off the barn roof and shattered on the ground. The sound sharp as a verdict. Rose's life was back in his hands, and Gideon Hale did not fail twice. Rose woke to the ache in her ribs and the faint crackle of the stove. The room wasn't the bunkhouse. It was the Hale main house. Warm sheets, clean linens, too safe for what she remembered last. The creek, the rocks, Tommy's scream. "You're awake." Gideon stepped from the shadows. His eyes looked like he'd held the night upright by himself. "Tommy?" she whispered. "He's fine. Ellie, too. Doctor said you took a hard hit, but you'll mend." He adjusted her pillow gently. "You scared us." Before she could answer, a sharp thud hit the siding. Then another, glass cracking. Gideon straightened. "Stay in bed." "What was that?" He grabbed his revolver. "Trouble." Ellie burst in, breathless. "Mama, men, out by the barn." Rose forced herself upright, ribs burning. "Stay close," she told Ellie. They stepped into the hallway just as Gideon threw open the front door. 3 riders waited beyond the porch, lantern swinging from one hand. Glass from the kitchen window glittered on the ground. One rider called, "Evening, Hale. Heard you running a family boarding house now." Ellie hid behind Rose. Gideon descended the porch steps. "You're drunk and trespassing." Another man nudged his horse forward. "Town's wondering what you're hiding in there. Widow, kids, lots of talk." "You want to check?" Gideon said. "Bring a warrant." "Oh, we don't need law for a peek." He edged closer. Rose felt the shift, like a door slamming shut inside Gideon. The gun lifted, not shaky, not warning, dead on steady. "You take one more step," Gideon said quietly, "and I drop you." The laughter died. The wind hushed. Rose stepped onto the porch, gripping the rail. "Mr. Hale, He didn't turn. Get back inside. No, you don't understand. I do. She grabbed Ellie's hand tighter. They want you to shoot. That's the trap. The riders grinned, emboldened. Rose kept her voice low. If you pull that trigger, Sheriff Kellen gets to drag you to jail. Silas wins. We lose our home. The children lose you. Gideon's jaw clenched. The hammer stayed cocked. You expect me to let them threaten my land? I expect you to be smarter than 3 drunk cowhands. She stepped closer. We can't bury another protector. Not tonight. Ellie peeked from behind her, eyes wide. Tommy's small face pressed to the window inside, watching. They're looking at you, Rose whispered. Don't let them see you become the monster Silas wants. A muscle jumped in Gideon's jaw. Then, slowly, he lowered the gun. The hammer clicked back into place. He didn't turn his back on the men. You have 1 minute to leave, he said. Next time you show up, bring a sober lawman, not bottles and lies. The riders shifted, uncertain, their bravado leaking like spilled whiskey. This ain't over, one muttered. It is tonight, Gideon replied. They rode off into the dark, leaving their threats in the cold. Silence settled heavy. Gideon holstered his gun, fingers shaking. Rose stepped down to him. You did right. He stared at the empty road. I almost didn't. But you did, she said. That's what the children will remember. He glanced at the window. Ellie and Tommy ducked away. His breath caught. I can't protect you if I can't fight, he murmured. You just protected us from losing you, Rose said. That's worth more than blood in the snow. He looked at her, really looked, like he was seeing the line between ruin and mercy. Tomorrow, he said, voice steadying, I ride to town and file charges. Trespass. Threats. Let's see how Crow enjoys daylight. Rose nodded. Good. Fight him with law, not bullets. The wind cut across the porch. She shivered. He noticed. Get inside, he said. So should you. They stepped in together, closing the door on the night, the broken glass, the boot tracks, and a war that had not been fought with guns, but with restraint. And restraint was the one thing Silas Crow never planned for. In the quiet that followed that long, bitter night, something changed on Hale Ranch. Not because the danger had passed. Montana always keeps a few storms tucked behind the hills. But because 3 souls who were strangers only days before now held on to each other like a family, formed by grace, not blood. Gideon Hale stood a little straighter the next morning, knowing every choice he made wasn't just about land or reputation anymore. It was about 2 children who had finally slept without fear, and a woman who had nearly given her life twice before dawn. And Rose, bruised, healing but unbroken, realized that sometimes the Lord sends shelter in the shape of a stubborn rancher who doesn't quite know how to pray, but knows exactly when to hold the door open. As this chapter closes, I'd love to hear from you. Your thoughts, your memories, even stories from your own life that echo courage, second chances, or the quiet kindness of strangers. If this tale spoke to your heart, please consider liking the video, subscribing, and sharing your city or country in the comments. Your presence here keeps these Western stories alive, and I'm grateful for every one of you. Thank you for watching, and God bless.